Today, I have a special guest, Jay Dyer, author, geopolitical commentator, conspiracy theorist.
Okay. All the above.
Anything I missed?
So-called comedian. We do live comedy events now, too. So.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Really cool. So you hosted the last hour of the Alex Jones show the last
3 years, yeah.
So how did you get into this stuff?
I was raised Baptist, and I remember about age 18, I went to a Christian bookstore and just started grabbing conspiracy books about the United Nations. That kind of was my initiation into this whole weird domain. Then at grad school, undergrad and grad school, I started studying geopolitics, history, and psychological warfare. And so I was blogging at the same time, just kind of writing about movies, what I thought was cool, symbolism in film, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that led to me writing a thesis basically about the role of British intelligence and the CIA in crafting films, movies. So they have a really important role in Hollywood. And that eventually led to the first book. And then I got a call or an email, I think, from Alex's producer maybe 4 years ago, like, hey, you want to come visit and check out the show and come on? Yeah, sure. So, but I've been doing this for a long time prior to that. I just started with blogging, and that turned into podcasts and analysis. So.
And do you and Alex Jones agree on pretty much everything? Like, where do you guys disagree on some stuff?
I mean, the focus of his show is usually kind of the news of the day. And so when it comes to big issues like 9/11 or the war on terror or foreign policy, that kind of stuff, we usually agree. I have some criticisms of classical liberalism, which is his kind of overriding philosophy. So there I would be more on the traditional conservative side of things. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, he lets me do his impersonations of him. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, so, I mean, we pretty much agree.
Well, because I talked to him a couple of months ago, and it's crazy the wealth of knowledge he had. Mm-hmm. He would just start talking about these random names, and I'd be like, who? What?
Yeah, actually, when I was listening to him first in 2003, I saw him talking about Skull and Bones, this little clip, and I was like, what's Skull and Bones? And that prompted me to start reading a bunch on conspiracy stuff, which turned into analyzing, eventually that turns into espionage and geopolitics. So I went deep into that at an academic level, and I found out all these books that Alex was talking about that were written by high-level policy people like Brzezinski and Kissinger and David Rockefeller and Jacques Attali. I went and read all these books, and because I was studying that stuff, I was skeptical too. I was like, surely they're not really planning for this global government type thing.
Yeah.
But Alex was right about everything he said, so yeah.
So, but how does the average person know that you guys are telling the truth? Right? Because it's kind of it's so confusing for the average person.
Right.
When it's you're taught one thing in school, you're taught one thing at work, you're taught one thing from the media. How do you know what's true and what's not true?
There's no easy answer to that. I think that social media, the way things are now, at least before a lot of the clampdown and the change of the algorithms, it was really easy for people today, especially younger generation Zoomer people. They can get information in a quicker way. Even in 2003 and 4 or 5, I'd have to go to the library to find these books and dig it up. Now you can just have a little clip that shows what these people are saying. I mean, I think in the last few years, especially after the big psyop that we all went through recently, I think that has accelerated people waking up because you can just compact everything into short clips. I'm not a big fan of the short clips, but they also are pretty good for waking up boomers and people that are kind of asleep.
So you were actually going to the libraries and digging this stuff up.
Yeah.
And why are the libraries different from, say, the media or the search engines? Did they have less control over those?
Yeah. So back then, well, this is in the 2000s when I was doing undergrad and grad research. I was a research assistant too for the grad professors and all that. But I was in a unique position where you get access to a lot of databases that the public doesn't have. So basically, you have to be in academia as an active student or professor to get access to a lot of databases. I'm assuming it's still that way. I haven't been in upper academia for probably 10 years, but I'm assuming it's still the same way. So you just get access to a lot of papers that most people can't get, like PhD papers, white papers, a lot of times if the public wants to buy those, they're like $40-$50. There's a lot of things that were done in this.
Right.
There's a lot of things that were done in the 70s and 80s that were they're really rare. But I was able to. I'm always hunting for books, so I've been able to acquire a lot of these really rare kind of policy papers. Like depopulation papers, that kind of stuff from like 20, 30 years ago.
And who are the people that were doing this? Is that because I think I don't know if it was Dawson or it was one of the, I call them like the conspiracy theorist guys. Mm-hmm. He was saying like it's the unelected government officials. Like those are the people that are passing this stuff, or?
Yeah, there's basically everybody thinks in the normie world that politicians run things, but right. there's a class of people above them that are part of steering committees. They're a part of foundations, think tanks. Those are the people that really call the shots, and they pretty much tell the politicians what to do. And the politicians, due to bribes, lobbying, compromise, they do their marching orders. So this is like Bilderberg Group. This would be like Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. Those are people that really call the shots.
Who? Say the names again.
Bilderberg Group is started by David Rockefeller and one of the European nobility out of the SS back in the 50s. That's a big steering committee group that meets every year. They used to be fairly private or semi-private. They're pretty well known nowadays, so it's not. They don't really try to keep it as secret as they used to. But there's just sort of these above government steering committee groups like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission. That was created by Kissinger just for Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was basically the national security advisor under multiple presidents like Carter, and then he kind of went into this sort of.
And that's an appointed government position.
Well, I mean, it's above government is the point. So these steering committees are people who aren't even in government, right? Like Kissinger might have been a consultant or a national security advisor for a while. Mm-hmm. Then he'll go into being a private consultant, but they actually have a lot more power and sway than anybody who's, again, an elected official, because they're working for the wealthiest people in our country.
So so if you're a wealthy person, you just hire them as a consultant?
Well, the wealthy people set up steering committees and foundations that are not technically part of government. There's a revolving door where a lot of government people will then go to work for these entities. Mm-hmm. But these entities have a lot more power. Like, I'm sure you've heard of like the Soros Foundation.
Soros?
Yeah.
They blame like everything on him, right?
Well, that's just one foundation.
Yeah.
So, but we have a whole history of Ford Foundation, Carnegie Endowment, Rockefeller Foundation. The New York Times reported a few years ago that Soros' foundation was like the biggest in the world now, but up until then it was the Ford Foundation. But all of these entities, there was even committee hearings. Like the government did an investigation, I think in the 50s and 60s, called the Reese Committee hearings. And they investigated all these foundations, and turns out, they've been pushing leftist socialist stuff for forever.
Okay, and that's a lot of them published books that were in the library.
Yes, correct.
So, but if this is a secret, why would they publish books on them?
It's semi-secret. So their attitude is that the general public is not reading policy paper books. They don't care about this stuff. So there's no real danger in publishing these things at an academic level, because most of the time the people that are going to read this stuff are people who are in academia and then will go to work at, consulting firms or think tanks or be recruited into CIA or whatever. So the only people that are going to be even interested would be that class of persons recruited out of Ivy League, Yale or something like that. So, but I mean, I wasn't at Ivy League University, but I was in a position where I was hearing Alex list all these books. And I mean, I was working in the library, so I could just go read them and then buy them, because a lot of times the libraries will just get rid of them. So a lot of this stuff is old too. Like we're talking stuff from the 60s, 70s. Like people don't really care about them.
Oh, okay, but that's not like that old. I mean, it's like what, 50?
I'm saying like they wouldn't care about
it now,
right?
Because it was like something that happened in the 60s was before I was born. Why would I care?
Yeah, I mean, most people are just kind of, as you said, conditioned by media, or they're dumbed down by the education system. They're not really interested in figuring out who's really running things, what's really going on. But all these things are very public. They're very well known. I mean, all the people like at the CIA or whoever, they answer to the national security director, and those people are part of the CFR. They're part of these steering committees. So it's kind of like a pyramid, so to speak.
Okay. And when did it start?
Well, America has had a struggle with this, you could argue, maybe even around the time of the Federal Reserve. So 1913 is where you get the private bank known as the Federal Reserve that's under the guise of being public, but that controls our money supply. And then afterwards, the same people that helped to push that and get that set up, this would be people like Colonel Edwin Mandell House. He was a famous British guy he was an agent of the British establishment, working together with a lot of the wealthy family elites on the Eastern Seaboard. They helped set up the banking structure that we have now. Then some of those same people then set up in the 1920s the Council on Foreign Relations, and then you get in the 1970s Trilateral Commission. 1942, the OSS is set up, which becomes the CIA. That was all set up by British intelligence. So it's essentially these national security breakaway families and billionaires working together with British elites that helped set up our superstructure, which is modeled on what the British call Chatham House. So if you go to London, I'm sure you've been in that region quite a bit, there's an area where it's called Chatham House, and that's a meeting place where they have Chatham House rules. And this is where you're not allowed to really talk about what goes on in these steering committee meetings unless you're part of the meeting. So it's a lot of the upper crust of the British establishment. That model was copied at Pratt House in New York, and it's modeled on the Rothschild and Cecil Rhodes structure of what's called roundtable groups. So roundtable groups are steering committee groups that were the old...
What do you mean steering committee? What is that?
They're calling it like the Knights of the Round Table is the model of it, right? So, okay. I mean, it's not literally going back to the Knights. It's just an idea, like we're going to be like today's, Knights of the Round Table. And
so they want to like control society. Basically.
Absolutely.
And that's like, they almost view themselves as like higher, I'm guessing.
They call themselves the wise men of the West. Like Kissinger is famously one of these, Brzezinski. So those are more like the brains. They're not like the money class. Like Kissinger wasn't, I don't think he was born into any wealth, but he kind of worked his way up and was considered one of the genius brains of the modern world. So they then go and work at and work with things like the Rand Corporation. Have you heard of that? Mm-mm. That's like the premier think tank. So basically they modeled the whole Cold War for us. If you watch the movie Dr. Strangelove by Kubrick, that's about the Rand Corporation. So all the Cold War was a lot of kind of big level trickery and psyops to scare the crap out of everybody that they were going to get nuked. But it was ultimately for a long-term goal to bring about the technocratic thing that we're going into now.
And was it the same thing as like Iraq? Like how they lied about the weapons of mass destruction?
That was designed at Rand Corporation. Rand Corporation designed Desert Storm and all of the wars. So it was like a corporate war that they designed.
Okay, and so all these rich families are basically, they're funding the wars too?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. How many rich families is it?
Well, one of the people from the Kissinger group, who's a bunch of these kind of elite, nerdy think tank people, was David Rothkopf, and he wrote a book about the managerial class. And he argued that the Western Atlanticist power block is basically run by like 6,000 people. So there's a managerial class of about 6,000, but they submit to, the top 10, 20 wealthiest families. So that's who runs everything.
And that's like the Rothschilds?
They would be up there. This is in Dr. Carol Quigley's books. He was Bill Clinton's mentor, and he wrote kind of from the perspective of the Council on Foreign Relations, the history of the last century. He wrote a book that he published in the 1960s, a 1,300-page book called Tragedy and Hope. And in that book, he explains from the elite's perspective the whole 20th century. And he says the two world wars were done for the purpose of bringing about ultimately global governance. We're not there yet, but that's their goal. And it was these wealthy families and elites that were behind that. So he talks about the Astors, the Cliveden set, the Rothschilds, Cecil Rhodes. All of those were part of this, what they called the roundtable groups that wanted to bring about this socialist world government.
How did the Cold War give them more of a global world government?
Because the excuse for the Cold War, there's a great chapter in the middle of Quigley's book about how that was
Quigley. Sorry,
Dr. Carol Quigley was a Georgetown historian that was Bill Clinton's mentor. Okay. And he wrote from the vantage point of the CFR archive. So he's writing the history of the 20th century from the elite perspective because he had access to these archives. So he says, here's what really went on in the 20th century. And he's not a conspiracy theorist. He's an establishment dude. Mm-hmm. So he wrote this giant text. Then he wrote another book called Anglo-American Establishment, which is just the entire Western sort of power blocks game plan. and it's the old British imperial model, but now it's the Pax Americana, not the British Empire, but it's a lot of the elites out of the UK and in America. And the idea, and that includes Israel as well now. So it's not just, when I say Anglo-American establishment, that's the name of the area, the region in geopolitics. Has nothing to do with the genetics of the people. It also includes Israel.
Okay, so sorry, that's a lot. So all these families, they work together. And their whole, and they say this in their books.
Absolutely.
Like if you read their books, they admit to this.
Yeah.
What if are they ever questioned on it?
No, because nobody reads these books.
No, I mean, like
Luke Rudkowski did ask. I think he's asked Kissinger. He's asked one of the Rothschilds on video. He's asked some of these people, and they're just like, yeah, whatever. They don't pay any attention. So I mean, it's a totally psychopathic kind of arrogant attitude. They don't. I mean, the people are bugs, so they don't care.
So are they wrong in a way, because they say that they're like smarter than everyone else, and are they wrong? Aren't they in a way?
Well, I mean, I think that if you,
I'm not saying it's like right, but
if you equate it with psychopathy, I don't equate intelligence necessarily with psychopathy, and I think the whole plan that they have is kind of, I mean, again, it's technocratic, it's transhumanist. They think that eventually there will be a world government. Everybody will be submitting to, AI. All the cities, smart cities, will be run by AI. But they believe in a mass depopulation. So I think it's a totally weird anti-human agenda. I don't think it's. I mean, there's a lot of intelligent people amongst that class, but they're also kind of psychopathic and I mean, the sort of the very ethos is against human nature itself. So.
And is that okay? Because I've also seen the white stuff. Is that like, I don't know, what's it called? That blonde chick was talking about it on Twitter.
Oh, Ava. Yeah. So I mean, there's
she gave some speech.
Yeah, Ava Blender.
The migration was part of that plan or something.
There's a book written by Kelly Greenhill, who is she writes at an academic level. It's called Weapons of Mass Migration, and I think it's like Stanford or somewhere. So it's like an academic text. I read a lot of those academic texts.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, mass migration is a classic element of warfare. I mean, people think of warfare as like just, tanks and soldiers. No, warfare is economic. It's ideological. So it's soft power is part of warfare. It's cultural. Culture war is part of it. And then you have, existing populations being replaced as part of warfare.
Okay, so I'm in London, and that's like the biggest. I've never been in such a place where there's such mass migration.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. I live in a part of London that's basically Pakistan. If I go to a different part of London, it's basically Nigeria.
Right.
If I go to a different part of London, it looks like London. If I go to a different part of London, what else do we have? There's a million. But who's doing it then? Because if the British are part of the elite, why would they want that done to their own country? Because I thought you said they were one of the...
It's not the British, it's the upper ruling class that's like 0.01%, right? So the British people are victims of their degenerate elites.
But it's like, if you're British, like, why would you want that done to your own people?
Well, I think that a lot of cultures have been beaten down with false guilt that they're supposed to feel bad for being who they are, which is a psyop. And I think that from the power structure's vantage point, they want mass depopulation, but that there's a steps along the way to get to that. So one of the things you have to do is get rid of and replace certain people groups that might stand in the way of that. Mm-hmm. And I think Western ideological minded people that believe in nation states, borders, constitutional rights, those things stand in the way of the type of technocratic governance that they want to bring in. So the first thing they have to get rid of is the types of firewalls that we have in the West. Then it makes it a lot easier for them to roll out like the later phases of technocratic depopulation. Does that make sense? Like there's phases.
Can you tell me how that would work in London? So now in London, they have all the immigrants there.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Well, I think probably what they would do is ramp up all kinds of chaos. There was a document that came out from the British Ministry of Defense maybe 10, 15 years ago that talked about the rise of socialism, Marxism, and chaos, flash mobs, all this kind of stuff. So more and more chaos leads to the justification for more and more government and technocratic crackdown. So then they come along and say, oh, well, if the economy collapses, we got the solution with, universal basic income, and you can get.
Oh, and so one thing that I think they did was they have the cameras everywhere.
Exactly.
So it's like a surveillance state.
It is.
I've heard that.
That was predicted in 1984. So if you read George Orwell's 1984, he was writing about the plans of the Fabian socialists in the novel. That's what Ingsoc is. It's called Ingsoc, English socialism. And that's why there's cameras everywhere. That's why everybody's tracked and traced. That's why everything's controlled. And he was particularly writing about Stalinism. And then his buddy, Aldous Huxley, was writing about a better version of how he thought the dystopia would come about, which is not heavy-handed, like stormtroopers or something, but rather a drugged out utopia where everybody just submits to the slavery on their own. So basically you just opt into being a part of the matrix and living in your coon pod or whatever.
And that's like an apartment, right? In a way.
Well, I mean, it could be just any kind of living space that is connected to the idea of austerity, antinatalism, not having private property. That's the idea that it's bad for the earth to have babies.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Having children hurts Mother Earth.
Right.
Which is all, again, a top-down. I mean, this is funded by all the billionaires, like Bill Gates, Richard Branson. All those people are very big promoters of fake meat, antinatalism, depopulation, Extinction Rebellion. That's a British thing. That comes out of the British ideology of Malthusianism. Have you heard of that? Mm-mm. So Malthus was a minister in the Anglican Church in the 1700s, and he came up with this theory by looking at flies in a jar that there would not be enough food to feed everybody, so we got to depopulate everybody. Mm-hmm. So that mutates into the ultimately what becomes, it's called Malthusianism, but it becomes eugenics, and that becomes the idea that we have to basically reduce the global population massively, or we're all going to die. So it's like a psyop based around fear and so forth. But this is literally like every think tank, every big entity that I'm talking about, this is their modus operandi.
So basically all these think tanks, I'm guessing colleges too.
Colleges push what the think tanks and the foundations, because the foundations fund the colleges and then they push this ideology.
Okay, so I need to break this. So there's the rich families, and they fund the think tanks.
And the foundations, the NGOs, yep.
Think tanks, foundations, NGOs, and they fund universities.
And a lot of the people at the think tanks, NGOs, and foundations are professors at the universities.
And museums and stuff.
Absolutely.
Because I think Rachel told me.
Oh, yeah, they're big propaganda things, yeah.
Okay. And that started around 1913. So in the last 100 years, roughly?
Well, I mean, I think that's just 1913 is just the control of the money system from these people. So if you read Tragedy and Hope, the first 100 pages are devoted to how the money supply and the printing of money became under the control of these families and these elites. So that's what the whole book is about in the first few hundred pages. And then he talks about the two world wars being engineered, basically. Oh,
because they went off the gold standard.
Correct. And eventually by the 70s they did, yeah.
And do you think it's like the Jewish people? Are you in that camp?
I think that the Rothschilds and certain families play a key role. I don't think it's entirely Jewish. It's also a lot of other elites. Also, I think the Rothschilds kind of dupe a lot of people into thinking that they're concerned with Jews or something like that. I think that's a puzzle piece, like a piece on the chessboard. And there's a bigger game afoot than just whether you're Jewish or not Jewish.
So you think it's more of a money thing?
Ultimately, it's a power thing.
How much money do you have to be invited?
I don't I think there's tiers, right? So there was a meeting a few years ago in I think New York, but it was called the Good Club, and that was Bill Gates, Soros, Oprah. Mm-hmm. So Oprah got invited to one of the sort of lower outer tiers of it, and their whole meeting was about how it's an emergency to reduce population. So that's one example of it. But I think that there's bloodlines and families that go back that have been kind of involved in this way before Oprah or Bill Gates. So
okay, so the Rothschild,
they're a big part of it, yeah.
And when did they get money? 1800s?
No, I mean this goes back to there's a great chapter in Quigley's book about how the Bank of France got taken over by the Rothschilds. I think in the 1700s. I'm going from memory, but he has a whole section on how the banking elites funded the French Revolution. It's not just Jewish, but it's partly Jewish banking elites, and it's Protestant wealthy banking families together that funded the French Revolution to unseat King Louis, because they wanted ultimately to not have any rival Catholic power.
Okay.
I'm not Catholic, I'm Orthodox, but this is just part of history. Mm-hmm. So that's the means by which they took over the Bank of France. And then other members of the Rothschild family were in other countries like England. They eventually got control of the Bank of England too.
And what year was that?
They got control of the Bank of England, I think, in the 1800s.
Okay, so so some of these families go back like 300-400 years.
Yeah, correct.
Like that. Okay, so.
But they also work with like the British royal family too, so it's not strictly.
The royals are in on it.
Yeah. I mean, they're massive promoters of depopulation for sure.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So why is there this push of people that like Hitler now? You know what I'm talking about?
I think there's multiple. I think there's multiple things going on where the population is getting agitated on Twitter, and so they're reacting, and it becomes a kind of a troll thing.
Okay. So you think they're just trolling? They don't.
Well, I'm saying that's an element of it, but I think there's also probably like Fed elite, like operatives pushing it too to rile up. I think there's a lot of things going on. So I think there's that going on. I think there's people are actually noticing real patterns out there and things you can't talk about. That's part of it. But I think that what happens is that from the perspective of like the social engineering class, the mad scientists that kind of design our society, they want to ramp up anything that causes agitation and division. And there's actually there was a NATO PSYOP document that came out called Cognitive Warfare a few years ago. It actually talked about maximizing everything on the internet that causes division, and trolling was one of the things they mentioned. I'm not saying all trolls work for NATO, but we saw this, for example, in the Ukraine situation where they rolled out all these bots called NAFO trolls, which were everywhere on Twitter, pushing the Ukraine agenda. So that's one example of what I'm talking about that the NATO documents talk about. I would say the same thing with what you're seeing with a lot of the agitate. It's agitprop to a degree, and agitprop isn't always completely wrong. It has elements of truth in it too. So it's partly.
Okay, so you think like the CIA or like people from those organizations they started are intentionally making the search engines more divisive and maybe putting people in some of these movements to make it more divisive?
I think all the above goes on. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a book that came out, Marketing Dissent, a while back, and that was about how to do color revolutions, but do them online. That came out about 10 years ago. And that was done in the ramp up to the Arab Spring. That was all done through Google and Twitter at the time, that whole revolution, which was engineered by the West.
What revolution?
This was a series of revolutions in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12-ish era called Arab Spring. And Kissinger was talking about it, saying that it would be run from the top down by Google and Twitter. That was called hashtag revolutions. That was studied at RAND. They rolled that out as a RAND Corporation study that they had done. So a lot of these things are top down. I'm not saying everything is, or that everybody's a mole or a troll, but I mean, if you read a lot of these white papers, you learn that like it's not like these people don't know what's going on. Like they fund and foster a lot of the cultural agitation.
Okay, so then do you think? Okay, so
let me give you an example. So like I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt, but
you're okay.
Just one example. Like we just saw these protests on campuses. And people were calling out, when I was on Luke's podcast a couple of weeks ago, I said, I bet you it'll come out that these are funded by leftist organizations like Soros Foundation, right?
Oh, and they were, right?
Yeah, I said that 2 weeks ago.
They were bailing the protesters out of jail?
Well, and they've done that typically for any leftist thing, BLM stuff too, right?
So, oh my gosh, so explain this, because, all right, I thought all the media people were afraid to be on the Palestine side, right? Like all the, like, Pierce Morgan is like, I condemn Hamas. Like, everyone's making the joke. I condemn. I don't and so there's like one group that thinks all the money is on the Israel side, but now you're telling me it's on the Palestine.
No, so this is both sides.
So they're just funding both sides to argue with each other. Why then does like Nick's, like their whole group, think it's just one? Like, because they just think it's like Israel's side.
Well, Nick was on with Alex yesterday and was saying basically the same point, that there's a dialectic at work here to force everybody to choose.
Oh, so he thinks it's both too.
Well, that's what he was saying on Alex yesterday. Okay. But I mean, I think that his point in that interview was that when it comes to the new policies that are being pushed here, like this hate speech bill, that's setting a precedent to swing things in a certain direction where you can't talk about AIPAC, Israel, and so forth. But I mean, for a long time, it was also the case that there was a lot of pro-Islamic stuff that you couldn't talk about, like on campuses or Twitter.
Islamophobia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of like there are power structures that have, agendas on both sides of that. It's not like everything is fake in a two-sided conflict. There's a real two-sided conflict. But the power structure, I think, above that has a long-term goal that transcends Middle Eastern politics. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that there is a longer-term goal that's very important beyond getting agitated about like the thing of the week. So like we're supposed to be concerned about, putting up Ukraine flags like for the last 3 years. Nobody even knows about Ukraine or anything about it. They just put the flags up because they're told to, just like when everybody made their profiles black for BLM, if you remember that.
Well, that's how I felt about the Israel-Palestine. People were like asking me to say something. I'm like, this is too confusing. Tell me this conflict goes back like 100 years. Mm-hmm. Both sides are telling me the other side's lying. I'm like, I don't know, Well,
in warfare, there's always going to be deception. So both sides will use, faked imagery, footage, lies, all that. Yeah. So I mean, that happens in all warfare. And there's not an easy like picking a side, because you have to go back into the history of the British Empire to understand what was going on in the Middle East. But what's happening right now is part of what's called the Oded Yanon Plan. It's the Greater Israel Project. That's part of the Pentagon's plan too, which was mentioned by General Wesley Clark of NATO, that they would basically destroy nation states, not just in Europe, but also that in the Middle East, they would create microstates to destroy everything for a Greater Israel Project. So Wesley Clark talks about NATO's plan for Europe to destroy the European countries and turn it into a big melting pot. That's the long-term plan, to get rid of nation states. Same plan for...
Nation states, is that just like a normal country?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, again, everything is about getting us to the final long-term goal of world technocratic governance. Okay. So everything that's happening, like all these different regional squabbles, is ultimately about that. So anything that stands in the way, whether it's Russia as a power or whether it's even China, I'm not pro-China, but I'm saying that even a stand against the West position of any place is ultimately going to be an enemy or a target of the Western power structure. Because it's not about America. It's about this international technocracy.
Okay, and is there people in, like, say, China and Russia? Like, are those families working with, like, the families in the West?
Yes. Yeah. So, like,
so they're all, like, even Asia?
Well, like...
Middle East?
Certain power blocks might take a stand to move away from their former masters. Like, for example, India used to be a British colony, and eventually they sort of removed themselves from that power structure when the British Empire started waning. But they basically came back under the power of the new, superstructure America. Mm-hmm. So Pax Americana is still kind of running things. The overall idea...
Pax Americana?
Yeah, this is just the idea of the American peace. So, like, you used to have the Pax Britannia. The British Empire brought peace to the world.
Okay.
That's why its existence in part was justified. When the British Empire waned, it kind of went broke and so forth. Then you had the rise of the Pax Americana, the American empire.
Oh, okay. So the American
empire.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and it is an empire. Brzezinski, Kissinger called it the American Empire. So, and they're the brains behind it. So, so anyway, so like the Middle East and all of that, it's just part of a longer, bigger game to weaken and go after any countries, any nations that aren't fitting into the long-term plan of the people in the West.
Okay, so what countries aren't, or like how many countries are involved and which ones aren't?
Well, so in the case of China, the Mao was put in by the Skull and Bones elite. Mao was what's called a Yali, Yale in China. So he couldn't have come to power without the OSS supporting him. That's the predecessor to the CIA. likewise, um, and I say Yale and China because Yale, Skull and Bones, and even though Mao was prior to the founding of the OSS, it was still aided and supported because the first head of the OSS, Bill Donovan, he went and trained all of Mao's guerrillas. So Mao's intelligence network and all that was set up by our intelligence people. So it's not to say that they weren't true believers in communism, but what I'm saying is that just as people in the West exported Bolshevism to Russia, we exported and aided Maoism in China because they're very good control structures. That's why David Rockefeller wrote a 1979 New York Times editorial saying that Marxism and socialism, he thinks, are the best things for Eurasia. So you might think, well, why would the richest dude in America want socialism in these other countries? And that's the key point that I'm stressing, is that Marxism and socialism have always been a tool of super wealthy people because it's a great control system. If you're super wealthy, like, you don't want competitors.
Right.
It's monopolistic. So why not export to them like a Marxist social system that you can control? Okay.
So, but I guess to repeat my question, like, is Brazil in on it? Argentina? Like, who?
Well, I think those.
Are there any countries that said no and they don't have powerful families that are involved in this?
I mean, those. I think that, countries down there, global South type countries, are typically only relevant for like certain resources, minerals, natural resources, or whatever. So they're not typically like power players in terms of geopolitics. So they kind of just fit into a regional block. But I think the U.S. was successful in throughout the Cold War, pretty much co-opting a lot of those countries. So the Cold War made this a big global thing. And then and I'm not pro-Soviet, but what I'm saying is that when they lost, when the wall fell down, that meant that Western banking power, corporate power, pretty much won. So now it's sort of like a mopping up phase of rolling out their technocratic plan. And the only countries that sort of kind of stand in the way are places like Russia or Iran or something like that. Maybe to a degree China, but some of the elite prefer China to be kind of the model for the technocracy. So, and that doesn't mean that makes Russia, Iran like heroes. It just means that they're not fitting into.
They have a different plan.
Yeah. They want to be self-governing and self-determining nations, and that doesn't fit into the internationalist plan. Okay.
And so is that why the Israel-Palestine thing's happening? Because Iran, aren't they involved somehow?
Yeah, this is...
like they're not falling into
right. So the Greater Israel Project is the Oded Yanon plan, which was launched, I think, in the late 70s, and people discovered it in the early 80s. And that's just the plan of Israel's designs in the Middle East to pretty much have like the full, scope of the land that they want, to control that region, those resources, and to be basically protected against any kind of adversaries. So Iran plays a role in that because Iran, due to their, Shia ideology, they're not favorable either to the United States or to Israel. However, there were always a lot of like backdoor CIA deals that were made with the Iranian power structure when in 1953 the CIA overthrew the Mohammad Mossadegh, and they put the Shah in. That was like the first famous CIA operation that was really successful at the time on that scale.
Who is that?
Who was what?
Mohammed something.
Mohammad Mossadegh was the nationalist leader who was basically nationalizing oil. Okay. And that was not amenable to the Anglo-Iranian oil company.
How do you keep all these people straight? There's so many. You know all the books.
Well, I've spent the last 20 plus years just reading, so I'm kind of a book nerd. So like what's known as BP? Okay. It used to be
the oil plant.
Yeah, it used to be Anglo-Iranian oil company. So if you own that, do you want the oil nationalized by Mohammad Mossadegh? No. It means you're not going to he's going to get the profits. Yeah. Right. So no, that's why BP, well, it wasn't called BP then. It was like Seven Sisters Oil, Anglo-Iranian Oil. Anyway, they got Kermit Roosevelt and people from the CIA, it's called Operation Ajax, to go in and overthrow. It was like the first big successful known CIA coup. Mossadegh, and they installed this dude called the Shah of Iran, who was like trying to appeal to like ancient Persian pagan king, like an emperor.
Okay.
Anyway, that didn't really last very long. And then the CIA had some deals with the Ayatollah as well. So when the Shia came back in power via Ayatollah, I forget there was Ayatollah Khomeini, but there was an Ayatollah before him. And I think British intelligence supported him coming to power, ironically. Anyway, long story short is that even though people think that it's all like anti-American or whatever, there's actually backdoor deals that are made. And this helps explain why, for example, Biden gives a lot of money to Iran too. Mm-hmm. So people might be confused, like they think, well, why would Biden give money to Iran? Mm-hmm. Well, there's backdoor deals that are made between all these countries. So
okay, so basically, these rich families, they made all these organizations to influence and control people that they fund, and that's museums, the CIA, universities. Is that right? And I'm sure there's more, but
right. Well, I think at the top up there is like you've got steering committees, Bilderberg, think tanks, NGOs, foundations. Those have a lot of power in America. And you might think, well, what about corporations? Well, a lot of the people on those boards are from the corporations.
Oh, wait, is that why? Oh my gosh, I did not understand why they said controlled opposition. Like they started calling the Daily Wire controlled opposition. Is that why they say that? Like why?
That would be an example of, like people setting up. The argument is fake right-wing things that aren't really right-wing. They're just kind of like gatekeeping things. So control.
You think that's true?
Well, I heard an interesting argument. I don't know the history of the Daily Wire, but I heard an interesting argument the other day. Somebody was saying that there's some very wealthy people behind it that fund it, and if that is true, then I would think that it probably is something like that, and that might explain things that happened to Candace.
Oh yeah, poor Candace. Okay, so could you go through the tools that they use? Because I know one of your big things is like movies and like propaganda is like a big tool. Like what are the tools the elites use to control the masses?
Right. So if you want an example of what I'm talking about, there was a great book written by a geopolitical analyst named F. William Engdahl, and he wrote a book called Full Spectrum Dominance. And Full Spectrum Dominance is the name of an actual Pentagon program to control everything.
Okay.
So if you want one example, that's a great example. And full spectrum dominance means every area of life, everything you could think of. So that would be controlling economic transactions, controlling your thought, controlling pop culture, music, movies, controlling education, controlling healthcare. It's everything. So it's a full everything you could think of, even to the point of controlling the environment, controlling space.
Do you think they control the weather? Are you on that? Wait, really?
Mm-hmm. No way. Not totally, but this is well known. Yeah. So you can go back to one of the early.
How do you control the weather?
So like an example. So
you think the Earth is flat?
No. One of the
easy.
You
go to the moon?
I'm a skeptic about a lot of things.
Okay.
So I'm a skeptic. So a skeptic means
I'm 50-50 on the moon, but the Earth is not flat.
Well, do you think that like in a life and death situation, would you play golf on the moon?
I don't know.
Isn't that kind of silly? Like,
yeah.
Anyway, but
sometimes Zerka, I'm like, is the Earth flat? Because I don't know if you know Zerka. I'll get going. I'm like, is it?
Well, wait, what were we talking about?
The Amish teach that the Earth is flat. I swear they do.
Well, everybody wants to talk about the Jews, but what about the Amish?
What about the Amish? I don't know.
I'm just making it up. The AQ. The AQ.
Well, I'm like, why would they teach that? I'm not saying it is, but sometimes I think about it.
Again, I'm a skeptic on a lot of these big grand claims because, for example, cloning. Like, I don't know if there's cloning. I've never seen a clone. But I know that science is involved in a lot of deception.
Right.
And if I can't prove it, then how am I supposed to just accept it?
Yeah.
Like Dr. James Lindsay was on Joe Rogan a few years ago, and he got a bunch of peer-reviewed papers published about gay dogs in dog parks. They were just made-up papers.
Oh, yeah.
But they got published.
I remember that.
So how am I supposed to just believe,
Well, I don't believe any studies. I don't believe, I sort of do, but, some of them will tell me that water is not wet, the sky is not. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's being a skeptic on things that, I think you can legitimately be a skeptic on, but So you were wait. Let's go back. You were talking about the weather. I mean, so one of the first interviews Alex did many years ago on this topic was a guy named Ben Livingston, and he's the father of weather weapons. And he was the guy that was doing all the cloud seeding during, I think, the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. So, do you know who Annie Jacobson is? Mm-mm. She's a famous journalist. She wrote. I always go to normie texts. Like I go to the establishment and the normie texts. Okay. Not conspiracy books. Okay. So she wrote a book on the history of DARPA, and that's the Pentagon tech arm. They invented the internet. So
is the Pentagon funded by the rich families?
Yeah. Well, it's essentially the whole.
Sorry, you say
all of America.
You say this like it's common. I don't know.
Well, so yeah, I mean, we're all owned by the same sort of power structure for the most part. So anyway, they in her DARPA history, she's got 2 chapters on all the weather modification experiments in Vietnam. So so this is like verified public information. Cloud seeding is very well known. Mm-hmm. So that's one example of it. The guy who was the inventor of the bomb, Dr. Edward Teller, he is the father of what's called atmospheric engineering. So that's the spraying of the atmosphere to change or to affect the weather. And so there's people can go, you can just look up Stanford VLF ELF project, which is...
They make it more cloudy?
Yeah. So I'm not saying that they literally control all the weather. I'm just saying that atmospheric geoengineering is very real. The CIA director, they take the clip down if you put it up. Mm-hmm. When John Brennan was the CIA director, he did a talk, I think at the CFR, about geoengineering. So
okay, so
you got my book. It's got 2 chapters on that in there.
Which one?
The Esoteric Hollywood 2.
Oh, this one. Okay, so basically the elites get together and say, how can we control the population? Mm-hmm. And one way they do that is the weather. So they just say if they want to ruin everyone's day, we'll make it cloudy.
No. No, I think that weather warfare is... I mean, there's a UN treaty about not using weather weapons. So why would you have a UN treaty for something that's not real? Okay. I mean, there's you could look up the Air Force's document about owning the weather 2025. That's a famous declassified Air Force document. Again, Stanford Research, the Stanford University has a whole page. They used to have a whole page dedicated to ELF and VLF weather manipulation. So all this stuff is old school public. The Royal Society has papers on geoengineering. So that's all real stuff. It doesn't mean that they're sitting there every day deciding I'm going to make sure that Pearl has a bad day because I'm going to cancel her flight with, and it's not like that. It's more
I mean, I would. I'm just kidding. but it's if I don't like that person.
I don't like that person. I'm going to give them
storming today.
I'm going to put a hurricane on your porch today.
Okay, so all right, but bigger picture, they I'm guessing they messed up the food supply and made us all fat.
Yeah, absolutely.
They did that
on purpose. Yep.
Okay, and then they made us all dumb. Mm-hmm. But did they let women vote? Because I don't know about that. I feel like that's where everything bad came from.
Feminism is absolutely 100% a part of the agenda, and you couldn't have any of that, the suffrage and all that, without feminism. So absolutely.
Oh yeah, because they funded it, right?
Feminism has always been tied to Marxism, and Marxism is funded by the wealthiest people on the planet.
Is it just another way to say matriarchy, sort of?
What, feminism or?
Feminism, Marxism, and all kind of matriarchy.
It's anything that inverts. So yeah, to invert the patriarchal structure, you have to put the woman over the man. Absolutely. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. But it inverts everything. So it also says that men need to become women. So everything gets inverted.
Yeah. Okay. So they tried to make us fat.
Mm-hmm. They did.
And stupid.
They did.
And then because you know what this reminds me of when you're talking? They want to confuse everybody, mm-hmm. right? I'm assuming that, so they put people to argue on both sides and they fund them and then put misinformation.
Correct.
Okay. I look for patterns, right? There's this chick. Okay, this is going to be a little off topic, but it's going to make sense, okay? There's this chick that had nudes on the internet, right? And she was very embarrassed about this. This is a conservative chick. And so what she did was put all these fake nudes out there to make it seem like the original one was not real. Everyone knows. They're like, what are you doing?
This is
like, I don't know if you know, like Brittany Venti, that chick. She's like a crazy lady, but that's like what happened is her and all of her friends like do this. Like whenever something allegedly, I don't know, but allegedly something real will happen, but then they'll put all this fake stuff around it to make people think it's not real.
This is what PR.
And that's yeah, go ahead.
I don't know about that case, but this is what PR firms do.
It's not a case. It's just people gossiping. But yeah.
Well, that incident's what I mean. Yeah. So like, I don't know about that incident, but like previous incidents like this were in the political domain. In like in DC, what they would do is if there was a scandal coming out, then you hire a PR firm to, I don't know if these people did that, but I'm saying like what a PR firm would do is, oh, we know something's going to come out about you, so we're going to flood it with false stuff too. Yeah. Yeah, because even with diet, like it's so confusing. Even just like health alone. I mean, there's a whole group of people saying veganism is the answer. There's a whole group of people saying carnivore is the answer. It's like, what? Well, okay, but I mean, who's funding veganism? It's all the same people that I was listing before.
Oh, I'm sure it's the libs. Yeah, I mean, you look at all.
Well, but I'm saying that that's the billionaire class, not just libs. Like James Cameron, billionaire, funds all the vegan stuff.
Oh, so are you team carnivore?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so carnivore is the right one. But
there's no billionaires.
I just saw a guy.
There's no billionaires pushing.
I just saw a guy that said like steak's good, but eggs are bad. It's like he's like a low vitamin A diet guy. I don't know.
I eat a lot of both, so that seems sus to me. So
I don't know. I'm not a health guru. I just look for patterns. Okay, but so that's basically what they're doing in health, and I'm guessing history too, because then they switch all the history to make it seem like women were oppressed and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. You should listen to, if you don't have time to read, because I know you do a lot of traveling, but you should listen to 1984 on audio. Okay. It'll blow you away because the main character's job is to change history. So like every day he has to go into his job and like retype history to fit what the system, the establishment wants.
No crazy. Way. Yeah. That was in where, Wikipedia?
Well, that was written in the 40s, 1948. So in that story, he's like, it's a fiction story. So he's going in and changing history in a physical typewriter sense. So he's editing history and changing it. So he would be doing what you're saying. Like he would be saying that, the history of all mankind is the oppression of women.
Is it fake or real?
Fake. He's just making up history.
No, I meant the story. Like, is he a real person or is he fake?
Well, George Orwell, the writer, is Eric Blair, who was involved in a lot of these different movements. Okay. And so he worked for the socialists, and then he worked for British intelligence for a while. And then what he found out was that all of this, both sides are controlled, is fake. It's a dialectic.
Okay. And then another tool they use is the media and movies and Hollywood. Yes. That's like your specialty, right?
That's what I was studying in grad school, like how movies and fiction are used as psyops and propaganda. Yeah.
Okay. And can I have an example of like either a music, movie, like an example that they did?
Yeah. Like, if you go back, I mean, this is old stuff, but like if you go back to World War I, Howard Hughes was like the big kind of Spielberg director of his day. Mm-hmm. And he was filming all of these movies that were like the blockbusters of that time. He did the most expensive production, I think, up to the 1920s. It was called Hell's Angels, and it was all World War I movie. That was all propaganda for the war. Mm-hmm. So from the earliest days, Hollywood was doing war propaganda, getting people involved in the war effort. Side with our side. We have to go to war because of this. So really, Hollywood was born out of propaganda.
War. So like pushing the war
yes.
that both sides were funding. So would they both make movies for both sides then?
Yeah.
Wow. So they would like make one side that's like a movie that says like one side's the good side and then the other. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the people that are like making the movies, they don't have to know like the bigger game. They really believe their ideology. So like a lot of people who were in Hollywood in the 40s, 50s that were communists, right? So there was famous communists throughout Hollywood. They hauled a bunch of these people in, like Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn, and they were part of the Hollywood 10, like the the suspected communists in Hollywood. I mean, they really believed in their ideology, but they didn't realize that the bigger global game of monopoly capitalism versus Sovietism, there was a game being played to it's called Hegelian dialectics, where you smash two opposing sides together to produce the synthesis. So it's thesis, antithesis, and then you get a synthesis. All of this stuff, all the conflicts are managed at a higher level. And it doesn't mean that there's not good and bad or true and false, but everything is split into left and right, not true, false, not virtue, vice, but two controlled systems that are intended to smash together to produce a synthesis.
What do you mean by synthesis? A conflict? You mean
the synthesis is the resolution of the two things.
So, and that's what they sell you, the solution,
yes.
Almost. And that's like, it takes away your freedom, mostly.
Always, yeah.
Always
it's moving towards the technocracy.
Right. And now it's like with phones, they know everything about everyone, right?
Yeah, or like two sides of a conflict. Like you got the frat bros out here who don't know anything, like holding Israeli flags, and you've got these Palestinian, pro-Palestine, like purple-haired freaks screaming for trans rights or something.
Yeah.
And then they smash these two together, and neither of these sides knows anything, and it's always about some other agenda down the road.